So some of you have gotten pretty mad at me before on this channel because I've criticized religion pretty harshly, admittedly. But if you are one of those people, then this video is for you, my friends, because today I'm going to go after my own community, the atheists. In particular, I'm going to go after one prominent atheist who I actually used to look up to and respect. His name is David Silverman. He is the former president of the American Atheists. And even if you're not too familiar with atheist activism from the 2010s, odds are you've seen Silverman before because he's the face of the "Are You Serious" meme, which came from this episode of the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News.
Tide goes in, tide goes out. Never a miscommunication. You can't explain that. You can explain why the tide goes in.
Tide goes in, tide goes out.
See, the water, the tide comes in and it goes out, Mr. Silverman.
Maybe
it always
it's
comes
Thor
in,
on top of Mount Olympus who's making the tides go in and out.
No, but you can't explain
a scam and a myth are the same. The myth and religion are the same thing. It doesn't matter if I can explain it.
It doesn't?
That doesn't mean that an invisible magic man in the sky is doing it.
And you're free to believe that.
And just like that, a legendary meme was born. And his reaction to O'Reilly resonated deeply with fedora-tipping neckbeard atheists like myself, because at some point, we've all had that same reaction to something that a fundamentalist family member said to us. So it really hit close to home and it was very relatable. But as the saying goes, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I am sad to report that David Silverman has indeed entered his villain arc. So back in 2018, the board of directors of the organization that he was the president of voted to terminate him following allegations of financial conflicts of interest as well as sexual misconduct, which he does deny. Now, these days, the organization still exists, but it's not as prominent as it was under Silverman's leadership. But they do continue to prioritize secularism and humanism, and they're currently fighting Trump's Christian nationalism. Silverman, however, went in a completely different direction. And even though he still does identify as an atheist, he is now teamed up with the evangelicals that he used to fight against. I wish that was a joke, but it's not. For example, if you go to his Twitter timeline, which you shouldn't do because you will get brain damage, you're going to see him retweeting posts condemning socialism, sex education, and taxes. He's also retweeting videos of war criminals like Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's boosting posts conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. He's also engaging in Gaza genocide denial. He is sharing pro-RFK Jr. memes and retweeting Elon Musk. On top of that, he is regularly retweeting anti-LGBTQ plus hate accounts like Libs of TikTok and Gays Against Groomers. And he's seemingly become as obsessed with trans people as the far right has. And it's so ironic to see him take this turn because his whole shtick was that religion is a scam, which implies that people who fall for religion are either gullible or they're being preyed upon. And here he is getting duped by the same evangelicals that he used to denounce. I mean, nobody talked about trans issues or their usage with regard to the bathroom or gender-affirming care or drag queens back in 2019, right? Even though they still existed. So ask yourself this question: why is this all of a sudden the biggest issue ever to some people? It's because this was a manufactured controversy by social conservatives and evangelicals, i.e. scammers, who raised the salience of this issue to create a common enemy out of trans people, so that way the Republican Party doesn't have to focus on issues that affect most Americans. It's the oldest trick in the book, divide and conquer. And they did this to gay people not that long ago. And they're even using the same exact arguments against trans people that they just used against gay people. It is meant to rile up gullible rubes. But I mean, I guess the trans panic apparently worked on David Silverman because he's all on board. So the question is, who's the gullible one now, David? Who's the one being scammed, right? Because you used to call out these kinds of scammers, but now you've been scammed by them yourself. So, it's sad to see that, but what are you going to do, right? And it's so bad that he even voted for Donald Trump in the last election. The Project 2025 guy, he voted for him. So Hement Mehta, aka the Friendly Atheist, who's a great follow, by the way, he writes, after saying he's voting for Trump, former atheist group leader David Silverman is distressed by how the atheist movement is powerless to stop the pendulum swing to the right, and as a result, we are about to get prayer in schools. So this is a classic case of, I never thought leopards would eat my face, but as you can see from the screenshots that he shares, in late May, Silverman announced, quote, I now feel that it's my patriotic duty to defend America by voting for Trump. Yuck. Dems, you brought this on yourselves. And I guess what he means by that is that the Democratic Party got too woke, maybe, I don't really know. But fast forward to November 25th, and he seems genuinely dismayed about the fact that prayer is indeed making a comeback in schools, after he voted for the Republican whose Supreme Court justices opened that very door. He writes, "When I left activism, the movement all but died. Every major American atheist organization went woke, abandoning the cause for which we all fought in favor of leftism. Stupid fucks. In doing so, the atheist movement cut all ties, many of which I'd created, with the right. Oh, please, we had no ties to the right. What are you talking about? Now, exactly as anyone could have predicted would happen eventually, the right rules, and the atheist movement is powerless to stop the pendulum swing to the right, and as a result, we are about to get prayer in schools." He then goes on to say more petty, vacuous bullshit and closes by saying, "Prayer does not belong in schools." And I agree, but I mean, this is what you voted for. You voted affirmatively for the candidate who is going to facilitate the return of prayer in schools, because Project 2025 would do the thing that you say you don't want. So congratulations, David. You went from being an enlightened truth teller to a person who voted for the leopards eating people's faces party. And unfortunately, he isn't wrong about prayer coming back. Prayer in schools is making a comeback, but that's only the beginning. Now that the election is over, Trump doesn't even have to pretend that he's oblivious about Project 2025. He never was, but let me show you what I mean. NBC News reports that Trump tapped Russell Vought to lead the OMB. This is the architect of Project 2025, which at its core is a Christian nationalist agenda. And as the Interfaith Alliance explains, Project 2025 is informed by an overarching assumption that U.S. law, government, and policy should be informed by Christian nationalist teachings and morality. The organizers of this extreme agenda like to present themselves as champions of religious freedom guided by faith. In truth, their plans would suppress religious freedom and diversity, forcing people of diverse faiths and beliefs to have their choices and rights increasingly restricted by one particular religious worldview advanced by the government. Project 2025 seeks to suppress various forms of diversity in public education and to erode or entirely eliminate the authority of the Department of Education to prevent discrimination in the classroom. It calls for measures to make it nearly impossible for educators to teach effectively about racial diversity or about sexual and gender identities. It also aims to fund private religious education at public expense by allowing federal funds to be used by parents as vouchers to pay for private religious schools. And I'll say it again, this is what you voted for, David. You voted for the party who has members that openly call themselves Christian nationalists because I guess you thought that they were preferable to the wokesters in the Democratic Party. I mean, these are people who literally think that they have a mandate from their God to subject all of us to biblical law, which they believe usurps the Constitution. And even though they are going to give you the discrimination against LGBTQ plus students that you wanted, that also comes with prayer in schools. That also comes with government using your tax dollars and mine to fund private religious education. So I don't know why you're bemoaning prayer in schools, because this is what you literally voted affirmatively for. But according to him, the atheists who didn't do that, who didn't go down the path that he went down, we're the ones who are dumb fucks, and he's the smart one. Okay, well, we didn't just vote for prayer in schools, bud, so keep telling yourself that. Now, to be clear, we're talking about a very particular brand of Christian nationalism called Christo-fascism, where it centers around one man, Donald Trump, and this cult of personality, and they believe that he has a mandate from God to carry out their agenda. It's why the school superintendent of Oklahoma isn't just bringing back Bibles in schools. He is specifically putting Trump-branded Bibles in schools.
The books you bought from what you raised in your Twitter handle, I just saw a link to that, was the Trump-endorsed Bible. That's $60 a pop. There are many Bibles available that are less than half of that. Why are you using the Trump-endorsed Bible? What do you say to critics who argue this is clear-cut political pandering right here?
What I would tell critics is we're going to teach American history in Oklahoma. So that includes the Bible, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and Bill of Rights. They are all included in this Bible that we've purchased. The Bible will be back in every Oklahoma classroom. President Trump is bringing...
Why the Trump Bible, though? Why not a cheaper Bible where you could save a lot of money in taxpayer dollars?
I just told you. All of those documents are in this Bible that we purchased for our kids so that they could understand the full context of the founding documents. So we have the Bible, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights. These are all so important in our students understanding what makes America the greatest country in the history of the world.
And to be clear, the goal here is to condition all students to believe that the American Constitution and God's laws are one and the same. And where there's some sort of a conflict or contradiction, of course, the Bible supersedes the authority of the Constitution. And the sad part is that students in Oklahoma, they're not just being indoctrinated, they are being failed by leaders for the fact that Oklahoma ranks 49th in education. But this is the inevitable and intended outcome of Republican policies. An educated and informed population is a threat to conservatism. It's why they want to abolish the Department of Education and defund public education altogether. Because if you learn how to think critically, you might start to think for yourself and question the propaganda that's being spewed by the far right. But to be fair, being educated and informed doesn't necessarily prevent you from succumbing to right-wing propaganda, as we've seen with our friend here, David Silverman, right? But to be fair to him, he's not alone, because so many other prominent atheists from the 2010s kind of went down the same path. Richard Dawkins, Bill Maher, Sam Harris to varying degrees. I don't really know what he's doing now, but he said some crazy shit. Sometimes he sounds reasonable. Who knows? But I mean, these were all atheist leaders who became reactionaries because they found common cause with evangelicals, since evangelicals like them are bigoted towards trans people and also Palestinians. And these reactionary tendencies started to become more evident when the new atheist movement kind of hit its peak and crashed out subsequently back in the mid-2010s. And even though they purported to be equal opportunity offenders who hated all religions, these people conspicuously always focused on Islam in lieu of Christianity, which was an interesting choice because, at least in America, Muslims represent a very small fraction of the population and they have no political power. But this fear of Muslim immigrants and Sharia law that was being pushed by networks like Fox News started to seep into the new atheist movement, and it started to morph into a type of neoconservatism where atheists would support U.S. foreign policy, presumably because it disproportionately did victimize Muslims in countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia. So to me, it felt like they supported that because it neutralized what they perceived was an inevitable threat. And they never said this explicitly, to be fair, but that was the sense that I got, and it made me feel deeply uncomfortable, and it made me feel like I couldn't be part of this movement because I'm against Islamophobia. I support freedom of religion. So I'm truly for a secular position where we all can exist in this multicultural interfaith society. Like that's what I want. And I started to feel isolated when they started to, go down that path. So to me, it really started to feel like it was less about religion to these people and more about bigotry. And it led to this implosion of the atheist identity as it became more associated with Western hegemony and neoconservatism and outright Islamophobia, to be frank. But before the movement died, there was kind of this split where people like Bill Maher and Sam Harris would chastise more left-leaning atheists for not focusing on Islam as much as they focused on Christianity. But here's the thing. Muslim lawmakers aren't taking away my rights and imposing their religion on me. Fundamentalist Christians are. So we are products of the environment that we grew up in. I was indoctrinated into Christianity at a very young age. I was taught to hate myself for being gay. So that is why I had this hyper focus, because Christian fundamentalists were the ones writing laws that were taking away my rights and marginalizing people, not Muslims. And in a post 9/11 world where bigotry towards Arabs was at an all-time high, it was irresponsible to hyper-focus on Islam when American Muslims have no cultural or political power whatsoever. And even though, these people, these new atheists would try to disaggregate Muslims from Arabs, because not all Arabs are Muslims, obviously, many of these people, like Sam Harris, seemingly used Islam or Muslim with Arab interchangeably to kind of get away with anti-Arab racism. So contrary to what David Silverman says, the atheist movement didn't die because atheists became too woke and pushed away right-wingers. They were never with us to begin with. The movement imploded because some of you motherfuckers let the mask slip off, and we noticed it and called you out on it. But I won't just scapegoat atheist leaders because, to be fair, there were other issues as well, right? I think that some atheists got a little bit too overzealous and, quite frankly, came off as insensitive assholes. For example, I remember this screenshot of a Facebook post where this lady announced that her husband died, and she said something like, "He's with the Lord now in heaven." And her grandson chimed in saying, "Grandma, heaven isn't real." And that to me hit me. It struck me so, it was kind of like this, oh my God moment where it's like, is this how we sound? How are you not able to read the room right now and understand how appropriate this is? She is grieving. You don't have to own her, by being a fucking edgy atheist right now. And, from there, I think it kind of became memey, and a lot of people noticed how cringe the atheist subreddit was, for example, and it just kind of fizzled out after a while. But at the time, I will say the atheist movement rose to prominence in part, I think, as a response to the fundamentalism that was pushed by George W. Bush. And even though a lot of the tactics of atheists was very abrasive and downright cringeworthy and rude, they were effective, right? I will say that. And even though, he did go to the dark side, I think that David Silverman was a perfect illustration of how effective those tactics were. So I want to go back to that O'Reilly clip that went viral. Now, to give you some additional context, O'Reilly brought him on to talk about a billboard that he put up where he called religions a scam. And he did this in response to other billboards, Christian billboards in particular, where they tell people that they're going to go to hell. So take a look at the way that he attacks the fundamentalism at its root.
You say something's a scam.
Yep,
on
it
a
is
sign.
a scam.
And then you come in here where millions of people are watching you and say that's not an insult. What does the word scam mean to you?
Scam means it's deliberately misleading people. And
that's not an insult?
It's not an insult to the people. The people are just following.
It's not an insult to the people?
It's a statement to the people who are following the religion. And really, it's attacking the people who are in the pews.
Right.
Wait a second.
Wait. Now, I'm stick with the insult, because this is certainly an insult in my opinion, and I know I'm not the smartest guy in town, but okay, so religion is a scam, but it's not the people's fault. They've just been lured in.
That's right.
Whose fault is it?
It's the leaders of the religion.
The leaders.
Of course.
All right.
I mean, this is not brain surgery.
The Pope.
The Pope, absolutely.
Right.
Look,
All
this is not brain surgery, and this is not world news. Everybody knows religion is a scam. The only news here is
everybody knows. I don't know, Mr. Silverman.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. I got to tell you.
You sit here and you're skeptical every day, and then you go to church and you get on your knees and you pray to an invisible man in the sky.
Invisible man in the sky.
You don't think that's a scam?
No, I don't.
Listen, when you humiliate a fundamentalist who believes that the Bible should dictate U.S. law by implying that he's delusional for thinking that his authority to rule over all of us comes from an invisible man in the sky, I've got to say that is very effective counter-propaganda. And even though that particular brand of atheism is now defunct, I've got to say, it might be useful now, since we do find ourselves once again in another era of fundamentalist dominance. So I guess what I'm saying is that even though there were some issues with the atheist movement and a lot of the leaders became full-blown reactionaries, we can resurrect it. It might be time to dust off the old fedoras and start growing those neckbeards out. And I'm sure that the Zoomers watching have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, because the fedora thing is an old meme for very hyper online millennials like myself. But I do think it's time for atheists to kind of reassert themselves again, albeit differently, right? We can replicate the tactics of the atheist leaders who went to the dark side while still fostering a more empathetic and less cringeworthy version of atheism, where we align with other groups to fight fascism. We align with other groups who are going to be suppressed by this administration. That includes trans people. That includes Muslims. That includes Christians as well, who are perhaps the most effective at combating Christo-fascism. Pastor Benjamin Dixon is the perfect example of this. He knows Scripture, and he uses Scripture against them to perfection, and he highlights their hypocrisy in a really effective way. So I think that a firebrand version of atheism that is progressive and less cringe, but fundamentally anti-reactionary, could be a really useful tool in this era for combating Christo-fascism. We can leave behind the leaders who popularized the movement and foster something better and more progressive. But when it comes to David Silverman, I'll just conclude by saying that the way that you looked at Bill O'Reilly in that meme, David, that's the way that we're all looking at you right now.
Mike is the worst progressive on YouTube. Please don't subscribe to him or become a patron. David Dole is so much better. Trust me, folks, he's doing a great job. He really is, okay?